What is going on, guys? My name is Michael and welcome back to another Ryz Media tutorial.
Need you to keep me close.
What is going on, guys? Welcome back. Today we're going to be going over how to stabilize your shaky footage, and there's a few ways to do this. Now, the most commonly known way is with a plugin called Warp Stabilizer. It's already in Premiere Pro and After Effects, it is a great plugin that basically takes your footage, analyzes it, digitally zooms it in, and throws it in a gyroscope to try and stabilize the footage. So I've already brought a clip into this sequence, and as you can see, I'm going to play it real quick, but it is kind of shaky. It is a handheld shot following a girl walking across a bridge. Obviously, if you had some sort of stabilizer like a glide cam or a Ronin, this would be a lot smoother, but since we didn't and it was just handheld, we're going to have to do some editing to get it to be smooth. So I'm going to play it real quick and you can see how shaky it is without any editing. So if you see there, it kind of jiggles to the side. Basically, whenever you walk with a handheld, it's going to do that kind of shake to the side motion. So we're going to need to fix this, and right off the bat, we're going to go to our effect panel, go down and type in Warp Stabilizer. So we just applied this to the clip, and let's play it with its default settings. So as you can see right away, it's a lot smoother, and if you go over here to your effects panel, you can actually edit some of this. Now with Warp Stabilizer, it is literally just a playing game, guess and check game with the smoothest scale. You don't really want to worry about the smooth motion. If you pick no motion, it's basically going to act like it's on a tripod, and that's clearly not what we're going for because we're following her and we want to continue to follow her in a smooth motion. So with Warp Stabilizer, you're really just going to be playing around with the smoothness button, and I'll say this, 50% is pretty much the highest I'll go, because as you get higher with your smoothness, the more it's going to zoom in, okay? So with the Warp Stabilizer, it's going to auto scale, it's going to zoom in, because it needs to throw it in that gyroscope, and you don't want to see the black bars, which brings us to the borders, where you want to keep it on stabilized crop and auto size, and auto scale, because it basically takes out the black borders for you when it zooms in. So that's important. So with this clip, it looks really good with 50% right now, but what I always do is I start at 50, the default, and then I work my way down. So I usually go to 25 next. And the reason why I go down is because you want the most out of your image, so you want to see the most that you can. You don't want to zoom in because it also takes away some of the quality. So I usually go down from 50 because it's going to lower the scale, and if it's still smooth and I get a lower scale, I'm happy. So let's see what 25 looks like. And that still looks pretty good to me. I'm going to go back down to 15. See what that looks like. Okay. Starting to get a little shake. 15 looks decent though. If I'm working in a quick sequence, that's fine for me. 5% usually what I go to next. Okay, and you get the point. I go to 5 and then 2. But yeah, this actually looks pretty smooth even with 5. So this is with stabilizer. And then if I were to go take it off, this is without. I mean, there's a clear difference there. And it's only adding in 2.2% of zoom. So it's a really, really, really good tool. Warp Stabilizer, especially for After Effects. I know they have a roughly similar stabilization process, but I hear it's a little bit more powerful and does a little bit better job on certain clips. But, if you're working in Premiere, Warp Stabilizer in here is definitely the go-to for stabilizing your clips. Now, I will say this. Warp Stabilizer does not work all the time. It is not perfect, and especially with shots that are shallow depth of field, it has a lot of trouble reading the footage. So since it does have issues sometimes, and it can't read the footage perfectly, and it's just not working for you, Stabilizer is just not having it, and you really want the clip to be smooth, there is another option, and it is in After Effects. I know it might sound scary, but really After Effects is not something to be scared about. We're going to jump into After Effects. I'm going to show you guys what I mean. Alright, so now we're in After Effects, and I'm going to show you guys how I stabilized this hyperlapse that I shot in Sydney, Australia this past year. Gonna drag the JPEG sequence into a new composition. So press down, select, drag it to this little square with the blue and red people or whatever it is. And then it's gonna create a new composition. Okay, so let's look at this without any stabilization at all. Alright, so as you can see, that is really, really shaky. But I did this, I took a photo, took a step forward, took another photo, step forward. So it's not going to be perfect. I didn't use a tripod, so I have to expect that it's going to be a little bumpy. But there's definitely stuff we can do here to work with it. Now, the first thing you should always do, and even though I'm going to show you a different way, the first thing you should always do is warp stabilizer. Okay? Because no matter what you do, it's going to help you. And even when you do this other way, it's kind of an addition. So you can use warp stabilizer and this other way to get the footage stabilized. So I'm going to let this run through, and we're going to see what warp stabilizer can do right off the bat for our hyperlapse. Okay, so warp stabilizer has just gone through its process, and as you can see up here, it is zoomed in 118%. And right off the bat, I don't like this. I don't like the look of that because it's going to cut off these edges and zoom in too much. And it's a beautiful church. You want to see all of it. And I mean, we could play it, see how it looks, but I'm probably going to change that. And so it looks kind of weird. It's a little distorted still. Definitely a lot smoother from our original, but I'm going to definitely bring this down because 118 is ridiculous. And I find often that, when you lower the percent, it actually does a better job of the footage. That's actually a little bit better. So I'm going to continue to go down to like 15. See how it looks. Okay. Go down to 5. Wow, and I think that's the best one we've had so far, is 5. So I'm going to leave it on 5, and that's a good start for, just using warp stabilizer. So I'm going to take this off and show you guys again what it looked like without it. Pretty crazy. And then with it. Alright, so warp stabilizer helped us out a lot to start. But now I'm going to show you the second part to this. I don't like it enough. It's not stable enough. So I'm going to go up over here. You may have tracker on the sidebar, but if you don't, like I don't, go up to this little double arrows, click on it, come down to motion tracking. Alright, so now we have our tracker panel on the side, and I'm just going to come up here and delete the warp stabilizer so we can show you the effect of the tracker by itself. Now this is again without any stabilization. Alright, so now we're going to try to track it without using warp stabilizer. So let's go to our tracker panel and go to stabilize motion. Now if you notice in the center we have a track point. I'm going to do Command plus on my keyboard to zoom in so we can see this. And now with the track point, we're going to want to put this in a contrasty part in our image because this is where it's going to reference how to track our image. So now I'm going to drag this around and pick a point on my image that is pretty high in contrast and where I want to reference this so that it can track its position. Now, if you noticed, obviously now since I'm going straight down the aisle, I want to put this in the dead center of my image at a contrasty point so it doesn't lose its track, and this is right down the aisle, so this will work perfectly. Now if you were rotating around, let's say a tree or a building or something, you'd want to go to rotation, and it's going to give you another track point. And maybe I'll cover this if I do a hyperlapse tutorial, but just for this, we're going to use one tracking point, and we're only going to be using the position because we're just going straight down the aisle. So now I'm going to put this on a pretty high contrasty point. I keep saying this, but it's important so that your tracker knows where to stay. And this little box is where it's going to find its point, and this bigger box is where this little box is going to move around in. So the bigger you make the bigger box, it's going to take longer to render out because it's just adding all of these extra pixels inside of its work. So the more pixels it has to work with and sort through it, the longer it's going to take. So we're going to make this pretty small, but not small enough where our little box doesn't have somewhere to go. So that looks pretty good, and this I'm going to make a little bit skinnier, and like that, make it a little bit smaller. And that looks pretty good. Hopefully it tracks it well. So when you're done finding your point of good contrast and you figure out how big you want to make the boxes, and again, this is a guess and check game, so if it doesn't track it exactly right, you can go back, fix the boxes and stuff like that, and it should be able to finally work out. So when you're done fixing all this stuff, come to the play button and press play. So now it's going to track the footage, and I know it's kind of crazy, but it looks like it actually did a really good job. Kind of stayed right on this contrasty point where I wanted it on the brown and the yellow. And so when it's done tracking it, you're just going to come over here and press apply and press OK. So now what it did is it's going to set all these keyframes up and reference the motion towards that tracking point. Alright, so obviously it didn't do as good of a job as the warp stabilizer, but it's definitely better from the start. If you see, it's still actually really shaky, to be honest. I'm a little bit disappointed, but it is a different way to stabilize it, and it works decent. So now that we've stabilized this a different way than warp stabilizer, I highly suggest that you either export this, create a new composition with this, and pair it up with a warp stabilizer, and that's going to give you the best result. Because if you just do warp stabilizer on its own, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. This is a separate way to do it. You can also use these different panels up here to try to do different types of tracking, but it's a great way to pair this sort of tracking with warp stabilizer to get your best results. I'm just going to show you guys the end result of what I ended up with when I paired this type of tracking with the warp stabilizer. So here you go. So there you guys have it. That is the final hyperlapse. I've paired the warp stabilizer with the manual stabilization. Again, I promise you guys, please play with those tracker tools. They're very, very powerful, and if warp stabilizer is not working out for you, they can really come in handy. But thank you guys so much again for checking in. Remember, we have tutorials coming out on Thursdays and Saturdays, so please continue to look out for our YouTube page, and we'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.